Greetings. I don't know if you remember me, Eric and Ashley, but I'm the guy who was on the Appalachian Trail with you about a month and a half ago, and I lost my teeth. The guy from Austin, Texas. And if you recall, you gave me a ride to my car. It was about an 80-mile trip up to Hot Springs, North Carolina. And as we did that walk, as we did the ride after we got off the trail, we talked a lot about baking. And both of you expressed some interest in cherry pie. So what we've put together here this afternoon, here in Austin, in our kitchen, is we're going to bake a cherry pie for you. And we're going to load it up on YouTube so that you can see what I was telling you about. I know that I was explaining to you how I make a cherry pie, but picture's worth 1,000 words. Also, I would like to mention the young guy named Jonah Johnson who was at Peck's Corner with us, because I've talked to Jonah a couple of times since we were out there on the trail. Remember, he was the guy who was interested in having his own business, and we were talking to him about that. So I'll say, hey Jonah. Okay, there's a person I would like to introduce to you right now. It's my wife, Cindy. 3, 2, 1, and here she is.
Hello.
Cindy received my text message on the trail about having lost my teeth, and so she was kind of in a flurry that Saturday morning too. But at any rate, she's going to assist me in making this video and bring me ingredients from time to time. By the way, I wanted to show you the teeth that came out of my mouth. They still aren't in my mouth. My dentist says I will have my permanent teeth in January. However, when we were driving up to Hot Springs, I wanted to show you my teeth, but as I said, they were full of oatmeal then, and I was kind of embarrassed about them. Here's the cleaned up product. So, first of all, I have to release myself from any culpability. Betty Crocker is where I get my recipes from, and all the ratios of ingredients that I use are straight out of Betty Crocker. There's nothing special about it. In fact, I would say this, that there's a million ways to skin a cat, and there's a million ways to bake a pie, and this is just one of them. And it's worked out pretty good for me. So, without any further ado, let's get going. What we're going to do first is we're going to make a pie filling, the cherry pie filling. So I start with a 3-quart bowl, and I start with some sugar. And Betty calls for 1 1/4 cup of granulated sugar. So let me do that. Okay, next ingredient is a thickener for our pie filling. I use 2 large dollops of a tablespoon. You might call it 4 tablespoons, but I just call it 2 large dollops, so 2 of these. Okay, so we've got flour on top of sugar in our bowl. I'm going to take this fork, we're going to mix it up. Next is the cherries, and this is very, very important. If you go to your local grocery store, they will inundate you with all sorts of pie fillings. I want to make sure that you understand that what I'm going to do has nothing to do with a pre-made pie filling. This is cherries. They are red, tart cherries packed in water. So, this is not a pre-made pie filling. Stay away from those pre-made pie fillings. They drive people away from eating pies. We're going to make our own filling here. I used to throw this juice away, but now I save it because I read that the juice is full of antioxidants, so I drink it when I'm making a cherry pie. So you drain the can, you just have cherries in it, just throw that onto your solution of your mixture of flour and sugar. They're 14.5-ounce cans. 2 of these cans make a perfect cherry pie filling. So now we have cherries in the bowl on top of our mixture of sugar and flour. I like a nice big spoon. I'm going to mix it all up. So it looks kind of like this. Make sure everything's mixed up good. Sugar, the flour, and the cherries. And in a matter of about 4 minutes, we made a cherry pie filling that beats the pants off of anything you buy in any grocery store. Okay, what I'm going to do now is put this aside, and we're going to start to make our pie crust. Okay, so we're in the second half of this process right now, making the pie crust. The person who inspired me to make so many pies was my mom, and she did not have all the modern devices that I have at my disposal. This is not how she made a crust, but I ate a lot of her pies, and that's how I got turned on to pies. At any rate, here we go. I make a butter crust, and there's a little bit of math involved in this. So I take a stick of unsalted butter. By the way, when you buy butter, buy a good brand. It behooves you to have good butter, because if you're making a pie, it should be good butter. So don't skip on the butter you get. I use unsalted butter, and then I add salt to the recipe, as you'll see. So I'm going to cut the stick into 4 quarters. And I'm going to cut 2 more quarters off the second stick. So right now I've got 6 quarters. Okay? And I'm going to add 1/8. So basically I've got 7 pieces of butter here. I'm going to put them into my Cuisinart. Now, I've done a lot of research on Cuisinarts and on stand mixers, and to make a 2-crust pie, a 7 or 8 cup Cuisinart does the job the best. So, what I'm going to do is, oh, by the way, use the metal blade that comes with the Cuisinart. They come with plastic blades and metal blades. I'm going to put the metal blade on it because it cuts the flour into the butter real good. So you just take the paper off. We don't want paper in our pie. Take the paper off the butter and just load it up in the Cuisinart. Okay, so right now we've got 7 pieces of butter in there, 6 quarters and 1/8. Now I'm going to add 2 cups of flour. I use all-purpose, unbleached flour. Usually gold medal, that's what my mom used to use. But it could be Pillsbury or anything like that. So I just stick my cup measurement into the bag and just kind of level it off. That's 1 cup. Two cups. Now I'm going to add some salt. What I've heard from the pie experts is kosher sea salt is the best to use, so that's what I use. So I'm going to add 1 teaspoon to this mixture in the Cuisinart. Okay, now it's kind of delicate what I'm going to do next. I'm going to turn on the Cuisinart and cut the butter into the flour, but I'm going to stop at a certain point. You don't want this to go on too long. When I turn on the Cuisinart, it's going to rumble because those pieces of butter are bouncing around in there. But it's going to turn into a meal. And as soon as you can, or as soon as you stop hearing that rumbling, you can turn it off as soon as it gets a nice level consistency. this point, the butter is well cut into the flour. The next thing is to add cold water. Cindy, my assistant, is bringing over my cold water. Thank you, my dear. So what we're going to do is we're going to add 1/4 of a cup of cold water. And the way I add it is as slowly as possible. So I'm going to pour this into the top very slowly. The smallest drip that you can make. I'm going to turn it back on. Slowly pour this in. So, you saw I let it run until it all got one clump together and started to spin rather quickly. That's when you have the perfect pie crust. So, one thing about working with pastry is you don't want it to stick to a lot of stuff. So, the way you can keep it from sticking is to use flour. So I'm going to get some flour. Spread it all over this ball of pastry. And now it's not going to stick. So, here's a piece of serendipity. About 7 or 8 years ago when I began making a whole lot of pies, my daughter for Christmas gave me this cloth and this. This is a sock that goes over my rolling pin. And what these two pieces of cloth do is they keep my pastry from sticking to anything. So what I'm going to do is take a little bit more flour, spread it over this cloth. That's ready to go. And I'm going to cut this ball of pastry in half. One for the top crust, one for the bottom crust. So now we're going to roll out the bottom crust. By the way, if you look on the internet, at this point, people are putting the dough in the refrigerator for 4 or 5 hours, letting something happen. I don't know what it is they're letting happen, but I'd always just go into making the pie immediately, and nobody's turned down this pie. Pretty good stuff. Okay, I'm going to start to roll it out. And there's some tricks to rolling it out. So, right now I have a pretty good circle, but I know that as I continue to roll it out, that it's going to get kind of angled and it's going to look like the map of the United States with Florida coming down here. So I'm going to pick it up. I don't want to handle it too much because we still don't want to heat it up too much. And I'm going to fold in these corners, I mean not corners, but the edges, so it's more circular. I'm going to put some more flour on it. And now this thing is more likely to turn out the same shape as my pie dish. Okay, I don't know what the diameter of that is, but having done this a million times, I know that's going to be big enough for the bottom of my bottom pie crust. So one of the really cool things about this is when I used to make pie, before I had all this equipment, moving pie dough from the table into the pie dish was the most difficult part because it always fell apart on me between the table and the dish. So my wife Cindy is going to bring a dish over here. Thank you, my dear. 9-inch pie dish, standard 9-inch. Now watch this. This is so cool. I thank my daughter for this. I just lay the rolling pin right here. Take a corner of this cloth, turn it up like that. Just roll it like that, and I can lay it right into my pie dish, just like that. Isn't that amazing? It's amazing to somebody who who's had it break on them quite a few times and has. So we have a bottom pie crust right there in our dish. So we're making some progress here. Okay, we're ready to put in our filling. So our filling's been sitting back here, and in case it's separated, I always like to stir it up again before I pour it in. My dear. Okay. So that we don't lose any of these cherries, I like to do this. Okay. Doesn't that look good? Oh, that's going to be so good. For cherry pie, almond extract is the bee's knees. It's so great. And it is such an incredible part of this whole taste that I want to make sure that the taste of the almond extract is broadcast across the whole pie. So I'm going to use a little sprayer, and I'm going to stick it into my bottle of almond extract, and I'm going to spray this over the pie to make sure that all of it has this luscious taste of almond extract on it. Don't go too heavy on it. I had to spend a little bit more time because I'm at the bottom of that bottle. Okay. Now we're ready to put on the top crust. So I'm going to move this back this way. And I'm going to put some more flour on this cloth. Okay, we're going to roll this one out now. So once again, I have a piece of pastry, and I can tell that if I rolled it out like this, it would be oblong. So I'm going to, once again, I'm going to curl in the edges like that. I'm going to get some flour, put it on that, and I'm ready to roll it out again. Okay, so when you're moving pie pastry around, it's always good to have you don't have to travel with this too far. Remember, we're going to do that trick again. Just lift up the corner, get this to turn on that rolling pin, just like that. And we're going to lay this over the top of the pie, just like this. Okay. I'm going to move this over here. I have an excess of pastry around this pie edge, pie plate edge, so I'm going to cut off the excess. Good. So I like to lift up so now I have 2 layers of crust here, of pastry. I lift them up, I curl them under, and I squish them together. Curl them under, squish them together. And so actually when you look at this from the top, it's kind of leaning in. And you want it to be leaning in rather than leaning out, because if it's leaning out, it will fall down when it's baking. So you have to somewhat lean it in. And there's always going to be a little bit of excess around the edge here, so I like to cut that off. And we're getting close to having a pie ready to go into the oven. So at this point, you have to figure how many pieces of pie you want to get out of this pie. And I usually go for 6 or 8, depending on what the venue, where it's going to be eaten. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut holes in this top pastry so that it will breathe and not explode when it goes into the oven. So I just get this melted butter, And I just apply it with this kind of like feather type of thing. Just make sure the top crust is covered. There we have a pie that's ready to go into the oven. So I'm going to put it in the middle layer of my oven, not the bottom, not the top, the middle. I'm going to put it on temperature on 425 for about, usually takes about 45 minutes depending on your oven. You might want to start checking it around 40 minutes, but that's about the time that I typically give it. So there you have it. That's how we make a cherry pie here in Austin, Texas. We hope you've enjoyed it, and once again I thank you so much for blessing me that day that we came down out of the mountain and you took me up to my car. You both were real angels to me, and I appreciate that. I hope this in some small way pays you back for the trouble I caused you that day.
And you were an answered prayer for me too, that you took him there.
Okay, bye.
Bye.